Hello and welcome to Property Matters, and if you saw our programme last week you'll know that I was joined by John Howard, property developer, author, mentor, investor, TV commentator. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much. Great to be back again.
Welcome back to part 2 of our programme. We've been looking at the changes and proposed changes in the property market since the budget in late September. We talked in our first programme about the need and division of different sorts of housing, affordable housing, private housing, social housing. And in this programme, I want to move on and talk about some of the planning changes that have been discussed in recent months and how much difference they're going to make to the market in total. So, John, we've heard of some of these changes. We've heard of 300 extra planning officers around the country.
Which is great, by the way.
Well,
if that happens.
It is, but that's probably one per authority, isn't it?
Well, they need to pay them much better as well.
Do they?
To retain them. It's all about retention. If you can retain the extra 300, if you can add 300 and retain everyone else there by paying them better and looking after them better, then that's great. That's a positive move.
But I think, you know, in order to progress planning applications quicker, great idea, have the extra planning officers, but they've also got to be of a consistent view, haven't they? And I do just wonder, I haven't heard anything about making the attitude to planning applications sort of consistent nationwide, the consistency of standards.
I think it's very, very difficult because quite often it's the personal opinion. It's like when you do a pre-application. So pre-application, every council is very keen on a pre-application. So you say what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Here's the plan. When you get an answer back on your pre-application, which should take 28 days, but doesn't, by the way, it says very clearly it's the personal opinion of the planning officer, and the opinion of the planning committee may well be different. And if that planning officer leaves and doesn't support it, and the new planning officer comes in and says, I don't like that, then you're absolutely stuck. So you're absolutely right. It's all about, I think there needs to be much more consistency. And that's what I think this government are going to try and do.
But do you not think, I mean, my feeling for a number of years has been that planning has now become more complicated with eco issues and all sorts of construction issues.
They're now saying, rightly so, that, you know, Angela Rayner is now saying that actually the red crested newt is less important than people and homes that will be provided.
Yes.
Now, that's all very well saying that, you know, it's like the bats, you know, you have to build a bat house for them and all these things, which you'll still need to do, by the way, I'm sure. And the crested newt will still be protected in some way. So will it make a difference? What the biggest problem the government have got, I think, is local elections. And people think local elections in May every year are not that important. And I felt the same until I got involved more politically. The problem Labour are going to have is this. Every government is very vulnerable in the local elections because it's a protest vote, it's this, it's that, they don't like what's happened. And when you have a Labour council that with a majority that then becomes a Conservative majority or a Liberal or Green, they will try and block any new planning ideas that are brought in by the government. That's a big challenge for any government.
It is a big challenge, but I'll go a little bit further. You see, I don't believe that in this days of complex development that an unqualified committee of members
I know where you're going with this.
has the overriding decision on the planning. I think it's wrong. Now, how would you put that right? Well, I would put it right simply this way. Out of London, you've got the situation where you have a parish council, for instance. That parish council hasn't actually got any control over the planning, but it has got an input into it.
Yeah, and that's what slows things down as well, of course.
It slows it down because of the way it's done. But if it was done as simply a relatively quick input of their views into the local authority, I'd be happy with that.
Well, that's really what it is.
Well, but it's not. You have to go through, you can have a pre-application meeting with the parish council. They can be very difficult. They can be very persuasive with the bigger council, as you say, probably politically motivated in some cases. So it's an extra stage that I don't want to do away with the ability of local people to have some say in what goes on in their local area. That would be wrong. But I also think that a planning committee for a bigger authority ought to be a consultative body. And I think the planning officers should be the decision makers. I think that's what it needs. I
think that it does need it's having a radical shake-up, of course, we know that. It's happening now. But I'm not sure that, whatever central government want to do, it's very hard for them to pass that all the way down to the grassroots. Very, very hard. You imagine it. They're massive. It's like a massive organisation. I mean, it's huge. The local authorities are massive. They've all got their own challenges. They're now saying, of course, that it's up to the local authorities now to come up with the target that is required and where they want to build. And where they want to build will then have the support of central government, and the speed of the decisions will be quicker. So say all the big house builders. I mean, what we must remember is the 10 biggest house builders in the UK build something like 65% of the new houses. They've got a massive say in all this. And if they want to slow things down because of the market, or they want to speed it up because of the market, they are really in control. The government aren't really in control of building new houses for private people, but they are in control to a great extent of building houses, social houses, which is what we said in the last programme. So for instance, they can fund through Homes England and the government bodies house building for councils on council land they have now already got. And these councils own swathes of land, brownfield sites across their authority. And I think I can see that coming forward quicker and building. But the only way, in my view, they're ever going to get to a target of 300, and I think it should be 500,000 houses, not 300,000, is if they did what they did in the 1960s, 70s, which was to compulsory purchase agricultural land, and they're saying they're going to purchase it at a fair value. Well, I'm sure the farmers won't find it fair, because it will probably be 10 times agricultural value, which I think is plenty, to be honest with you, not 50 times agricultural value, which is what they've been getting, and rolling the money over and not paying tax on it because they've bought another farm with the money. Milton Keynes was the last large town to be built, and it was built, it was successfully built on the basis that they paid agricultural value for that land.
Yes.
Agricultural value.
Yes.
No more than that.
Yes.
And I think if they want to get up to targets, they need to build 15,000 houses there, 20,000 there. But like we said, how the hell are they going to get them built quicker?
But again, if we go down the route of new towns, if you like.
Well, that's what they'll have to do.
I think that's what they'll have to do to get the number. But then we have, the water companies saying that they can't.
Not enough water, no water.
No water. Drainage is an issue.
Massive. Neutrality.
National grid.
Neutrality, where they're saying that, the developers are poisoning the rivers. Actually, 80% of any poison in the rivers is from farmers with fertilizers and everything else. It's not from developers, but we now need to prove neutrality. In other words, you need to prove that what you're doing isn't going to cause the rivers any more pollution. And if it does, you pay a penalty.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult.
Coming back to this 1.5 million homes in the Parliament, surely...
No chance.
Well, we need to know what
10 years what
the breakdown of that is, because... Yes. What I can see happening is if they fail on the social or affordable housing, they'll start grabbing in the figures from the national house builders of private homes and adding to the
Well, I think the 300,000 is a mixture of both. It's a mixture of both.
Yes, but we need to know what that mixture is.
Well, at the moment, I think last year we built 30,000 social houses, something like that. Now, they're going to want to build 150,000 social houses a year at least, to get anything like that target.
That's a fourfold increase.
Yeah, and you've got to remember how slow councils work.
Sure.
You know, and also once just because you've got planning permission, that's the start. You then got to sort out all the preconditions before we can get on site. That can take up to 12 months. Then that may be brought forward in some sort of speedy way. Hopefully that will be changed, because that is a major problem. The other major problem is if you're converting property and you're converting commercial to residential, some councils are saying, oh, hang on a minute, you need to market that commercial property that's empty for at least a year before you can then go to prove there's no commercial use. They need to scrap that, because the reason it's empty is because there's no commercial person wants it in the first place.
Yes.
And the same with nursing homes. All these nursing homes, again, you have to prove commercially there's no use for them. Bonkers. They could all be converted very quickly. The last government in 2012 has done the only thing really to push housing, and that is permissive development. Because that is, you know, we've built hundreds of thousands of flats. Okay, some of them you can say aren't the best quality, conversion I should say, not build. You could argue, and a lot of architects call them, nickname them slums of the future, because you never had to change the external appearance. Now you can change the external appearance, which I think is better, and there's more rules. But, you know, then Angela Rayner is now saying you can build up. So if you've got a single house, homeowner, you can go up an extra floor without too much difficulty.
Key here though, John, it's that where in the past we've had commercial buildings turned into residential, office blocks, this sort of thing.
Yes.
All very well, but the infrastructure is not around it. No shops, no schools, no hospitals, no doctors' surgeries. And that's quite a difficult too. So it's not a singular problem, is it?
It's a major problem. And I would argue it's a jigsaw that, you know, you have to fit together. It's a jigsaw. And I think, you know, schools are a challenge. Obviously, NHS housing, NHS is a massive problem, you know, more and doctor surgeries and all the rest of it. Pulling all that together is very, very difficult and very costly and very time consuming. And I realistically, I would have thought if you have a 10-year plan to build 500,000 houses a year is more realistic than having a 5-year plan to build 1.5 million. Because I think it will take you even if you get up to the levels that you want to get up to, it's going to take you 3 years to do it. It's not going to happen overnight.
No. Well, John, you're a lot more experienced in development than I am, but I mean, going back on my days, you know, you could spend 5 years on a project.
Absolutely.
People, you know, from conception to
I was on the train that's coming up this morning, and a friend of mine I bumped into, I haven't seen him for a little while, and I said, how are you getting on the site that I bought and sold? I bought it of the RSPCA, actually, they left it. I bought it and I sold it on to him. I said, how are you getting on? Well, we changed the planning, we went for planning, changed it, John. We've been messing around for 3 years on the site, and we're now going to appeal. And the appeals are taken up to 12 months.
Yeah. So that's a 4-year job
That's
before
4
you
years
start.
already. He said he paid cash for it. He said, John, if I borrowed money on that site, I'll be underwater now. Yeah.
Well, this is the problem. But what this brings us to next, John, is what do we build? You talked about some buildings not being of the right sort of quality. Very, very difficult to define what quality is. But one of my sort of pet feelings at the moment is that we went through in the late, I don't know. Let's
Time flies.
Say 2000s
Yes.
to start with. We started building all these huge 60, 70-story buildings.
Yes. Well, you did in London, but you didn't anywhere else.
Well, we'll stick
New York, perhaps.
We'll stick to London for the moment.
Dubai, maybe.
Yeah, we'll stick to London for the moment.
Okay.
We've got swimming pools, we've got cinemas, we've got libraries, we've got social areas.
I've got the tallest building in Suffolk, and that's 23 stories high. So that gives you an idea of how much taller they are in London.
Yeah. Well, I think the one I live in is 50, but anyway.
There you go. Fantastic.
But we've got all these facilities.
Penthouse, is it?
Could be. but then what we come back to is the facilities within the building.
Yes.
10, 15 years on from being completed, tired, need refurbishment, and have huge consequences
Too ambitious
for the service charge and cost of living in those buildings. Now that is a huge factor, not only the original capital cost being higher, but the running cost being higher is so restrictive for young people.
Sold you the flat though, didn't it?
Well, it did me,
Penthouse,
but I bought it sort of in my sort of midlife or later life, whichever.
Crisis.
Whatever, crisis, whatever. But I've lived there for now 12, 14 years, and I've seen the service charge go like that, which is restrictive for young people coming into the building.
Impossible, because it's hard cash.
Yeah. So do we think that architects now need to go back to basics? I mean, I pulled the leg of sort of architects who've come into the studio, and I said, I was taught in my early development days why you made sort of odd-shaped buildings, because the costs dictate your fees. Yeah. You get perhaps 10%.
Not when they work with me, it doesn't. But
no, I'm sure, but you know where I'm coming from.
I know exactly what you mean. They charge 7% of the overall cost of the development.
So if we built some nice square buildings without all the nonsense of swimming pools and all the rest of it,
I totally agree.
This is where we need to go if we're to do a service to our young people.
I think that's right, and I think what you'll find is, at the end of the day, if you want a swimming pool and a spa and everything else, go and live in a hotel. If you want to train and you want a gym, go and join a gym.
Go and join a gym.
Yeah, and I think but the whole point of putting all that stuff in these very expensive flats, of course, was to sell them, and then once they're sold, they don't care what happens.
But there's the interesting thing, John. You say to sell them. Who did we sell them to? Most of the blocks down here, on first sale, 65 to 70% were sold to overseas investors.
Well, that's very interesting you should say that, because the government are talking about bringing in a licensing situation where if you want to rent holiday units or short-term lets across the UK, you're going to have a license, because what they don't want is for the housing stock to deteriorate in as much in terms of numbers. They want to keep the numbers up as high as they can for it, and of course they're going to build mainly pretty bog standard houses for local authorities and housing associations. That's what this 300,000 target is all about. It's not about nice blocks of flats, that's a bonus and everything else. It's all about building houses for people to live in who cannot afford to live in a house at the moment, or haven't got a house at the moment because they're living in short-term accommodation and costing the government and the councils an absolute fortune. They want to get them out of there into decent housing. And of course, there is a social side to this. Whereas, if you've got a child in short-term accommodation with no garden, no anything, it's much harder to bring that child up in the correct way, manner. And
which has all sorts of social consequences.
Absolutely. And in many ways, the Labour Council, the Labour government are absolutely right. You need to build, people have got children, they need a home, a house, and security and a garden. And they're absolutely right. But at what cost is that going to be to the rest of us? Because, I just think there's going to be more and more taxes going forward, because, they'll come back next year to say, well, we haven't got the growth we wanted, it's happening. And of course, every single tax increase this year has been on Conservative voters. It hasn't been on Labour voters. No. It's been on, you look at it, Conservative voters. It's been on farmers. It's been on people that own businesses. It's been on people with private pensions and the rest of it. And that's political, totally, utterly political. But of course, the consequence of all that is that national insurance going up for employers means the employees, there'll be less people employed. So in the end, it cuts down to it rolls down to the employees as well, unfortunately. But I mean, they've got a hell of a job on their hands. And to get, it's a bit like the NHS, isn't it? To do anything, they're going to have to be radical. And I don't think their ideas will be radical. What they're saying is the local authority will have to provide a target of the amount of houses that are required, and they're going to have to say where they want them. And those house builders will then get support and privileged treatment if you want to do so. If they want to build anywhere else, it's going to be a big challenge. Now, they're also saying that they've got to take the local people with them. Good luck with that, because every MP will be slaughtered at the polling stations like the Conservatives would have been or have been when they've allowed 50 houses in some village and the rest of it. And that's the problem. The problem is you need to get all those Labour MPs to buy into this. And if they don't buy into it, you've got a problem.
Yes. I'm a bit torn with this one, John, overseas investors. There's no question that the overseas investors, particularly in London, perhaps Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, the overseas investors kept our property market alive, and particularly our construction industry through the
Did they?
Through the I think so. Through the downturns of 2010 and onwards.
Kept the prices up in certain areas.
Did keep the prices up.
Labour don't like that.
Well, no.
Do they? They want cheaper houses.
Well,
they want people to be able to afford houses. And they are going to bring in, of course, this this guaranteed mortgage with 5% deposits. That's on the cards.
Great stuff. I'd be 100% behind that. I'm
Devil's in the detail.
I'm not opposed to 100% mortgages. You know, when we had that problem in 2010, it wasn't this country that caused it. It was the Americans packaging up these mortgage portfolios.
If you're going to have 100% mortgage, fix it for 30 years.
Yeah, fine.
Or 25 years, because then you know exactly where you are.
Yeah.
You're not having some big highs and the big lows.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the things is many years ago, I bought a house in Switzerland.
As you do.
As you do. And it was quite a struggle to buy it because each canton...
We'll feel very sorry for you at this point, Stephen, watching.
Right. Each canton has a planning regime which says, okay, you can build this, you can do this, must be environmentally right, all the rest of it, but only so many can be sold to non-residents of Switzerland. And I thought that was quite a good idea at the time because it controlled the amount of foreign investment coming in, manipulating the prices really, because developers will always go for where they can get the most money. I mean, that's obvious. And I think to some degree with the private sector in this country, in some of the denser areas of cities, to say, well, okay, you can build this super block, but you've got to build it at a price that the UK market can afford. You can charge more if you want to for overseas investors, but you can only sell so many to overseas investors. And I think that might do some good.
I don't think that's a bad idea. They're talking about offering property to first-time buyers 6 months for 6 months exclusively before you then offer it to anyone else. Yeah. Not sure quite how that works, to be honest with you. But I mean, you know, you can't knock them for coming up with ideas, and we need ideas. I mean, the last government ran out of ideas, and I'm, you know, although I'm politically right, the right side of right rather than left, I genuinely hope that some of these ideas come to fruition, because I think overall we do need a revamp. You know, the planning system is very old-fashioned. You know, so many things in this country have been overtaken by, you know, what's happening at the moment. Things are changing so fast, AI and all the rest of it. And it's very, very hard for any government to keep up with it all. Very hard.
But also, John, in terms of design of buildings and our need to go green, if you like, I'm never quite sure that the government get it right. Look, we had all this business about insulation, the standards were going to be up, all the rest of it. All these buy-to-let owners were going to have to bring their properties up to a certain standard. Yes. People sold their portfolios because they knew they couldn't ever meet the standards. And then I think Mr. Sunak just said, oh no, we're changing our mind, and the whole thing was scrapped. We've had a whole village prepared for hydrogen gas.
Yes.
Government just changed their mind overnight. Said, no, we're not actually doing it now. And I'm never convinced that the government put enough into the research of these ideas before they inflict them on the market.
I think the problem is this, you know, over the years, Labour is all about big government and Conservative is meant to be about small government and letting people do what they want, making their own decisions. That didn't happen in the last 10 years of Tory government. No. Labour are hell-bent on all these green policies. But if you can't get the public to go along with them and businesses to go along with, because it's not possible, it's going to cost too much, you've got to do it at a slower pace. Everybody wants to do their bit for I think everyone wants to do their bit when it comes to the, green policies. I don't know anyone that doesn't want to try and do their bit and improve things. But it's got to be done economically and at a pace where people can afford it and feel comfortable.
That is the key of affordability. Yeah. I mean, I was looking at a TV advert the other day for gas boilers.
Yeah.
And they were saying, actually, you need a new gas boiler.
They're
very efficient. Well, hold on. Very efficient if you want to buy a new one. We'll install it the next day. And I tell you what, it's no deposit. It's so much a month, and you can have your new boiler in 48 hours. They ought to be doing that with the heat exchangers.
Totally.
On the stuff that's going to go green, really.
Totally. They need to be far more radical. They need support. But the problem they do get, of course, when they put a big grant, remember the windmills, you could get a grant for a windmill and all this. All that happened was these companies came along, doubled their price because they could get half from the government. It still cost you a load of money. Yeah. So it's never genuine. People take advantage.
But the same with solar panels. The government's taking the grant away for solar panels, and yet they're now saying it's what we really need. Yeah. So I'm struggling a little bit.
Very
okay.
Difficult.
Well, John, once again, big thank you for coming
My
in
pleasure.
and talking to us. It's always illuminating to have you on the programme. Love your opinions, and I'm sure our viewers are very grateful to hear your views on the property development market and the market in total. So there we are. Join me again next time on Property Matters. I'm Stephen Galpin. Look forward to seeing you then.